When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower-cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP works wonders.
Behind those cozy nights at home, thousands of employees at BP go to work every day. People producing more U.S. natural gas. People building grid-scale solar capacity. People turning landfill waste gas into pipeline-quality renewable natural gas. And people delivering all of that power where it's needed. They're part of the more than 300,000 jobs BP supports across the country. Learn more at bp.com/investing in America.
In 2013, director Paul Greengrass and star Tom Hanks gave the world a masterclass on how to build tension to the absolute breaking point.
In 2024, we take a trip on the high seas with a luxury bourbon.
The film is Captain Phillips.
The whiskey is Jefferson's Ocean.
And we'll review them both. This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, and welcome to Hanksgiving, Brad.
Hanksgiving! It is the holiday that no one asked for and everybody needs.
That's, dude, especially after such a high-tension last few weeks we've had here in America. We need the warm hug that is Tom Hanks as an actor.
We sure do.
You know?
And talk about a warm hug of a movie, Bob.
I was going to say, we've been very spoiled with our Hanksgivings. I believe this is our fourth one now, fourth or fifth. And
yeah,
Tom Hanks
this is basically the Terminal Part 2.
Yeah, exactly. Tom Hanks has found himself a nice little niche of heartwarming films. And we are breaking that mold today because this is not one of those movies. If you actually turned this on like after Thanksgiving dinner when all of your extended family is laying around the house, it would probably be an entertaining movie. I don't know if it screams, togetherness the way that some of his other Thanksgiving movies have.
Yeah, if you want your entire family to be weeping at the end of Thanksgiving, this might be the film to watch.
There was a moment towards the end of the film where Tom Hanks is splattered in blood and just going, "Oh no! Ah! Ah!" And I thought to myself, maybe not the best Thanksgiving film.
Well, I mean, for some families, it might just fit in perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know.
Well, folks, welcome into Film and Whiskey. What do we do here? We review movies and we drink whiskey. This is our fourth time honoring Tom Hanks on Thanksgiving. And we're also trying to align the film that we chose for today, Captain Phillips, with our theme for the season. So this season, what we're doing is we're looking at films from the last 20 years, and we're asking the big question, does this movie deserve to be considered a modern classic? Now, Captain Phillips is probably the closest thing that Tom Hanks has in the last 20, at least 15 years, to being a modern classic. I think it has a 7.8 on IMDb, so it's kind of hovering right close to that 8 mark where you start getting into the top 250. It missed a couple of the categories, Brad, that we wanted to review our movies for this season. But I think it's a good kind of sleeper outlier to consider for a modern classic.
Yeah, the 4 categories we have probably aren't enough. We needed a 5th category that says, is Tom Hanks in this movie?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this film falls firmly into the yes category for that. So yeah. I personally consider it a candidate for modern classic just on that category alone.
It's like one of those websites that people made that's just like is Henry Kissinger dead.com. And if you go there, it just says no until he dies. And then all it does is say yes. That's the whole purpose of the... All right, man, let's dive into talking about the movie a little bit. So this movie comes out in 2013. Tom Hanks had a kind of double whammy this year of Captain Phillips and Saving Mr. Banks, where he played Walt Disney. And the consensus around town in Hollywood, so I have heard, was Hanks is gunning for a nomination in both of these categories, and he could very well get it. We've seen it done before. We saw it actually pretty recently prior to this, where Kate Winslet was nominated in 2 categories at the Golden Globes. She put all her eggs in the basket of going for Best Actress. It ended up being a very good decision for her. Tom Hanks, I don't know what his strategy was, but it spectacularly backfired because he didn't get nominated for either of these movies. And I have to say, having watched both films, is Saving Mr. Banks a little bit cheesy? Absolutely. I liked him as Walt Disney. I think it's a crime that he was not nominated for this movie for Best Actor.
100%. Like, I have not looked at the list of nominees for that year. I don't know how you watch this movie and don't immediately think to yourself, this is a leading candidate for best winner of Best Actor for this year.
So we had Matthew McConaughey winning the award this year for his role in Dallas Buyers Club. A very good performance. Christian Bale for American Hustle. Bruce Dern got his final nomination for the film Nebraska. DiCaprio for The Wolf of Wall Street. And Chiwetel Ejiofor for 12 Years a Slave. 5 really good performances. Hanks should have been slotted into the Christian Bale nomination here. Like, there's just no reason.
I was about to say American Hustle. Good.
Okay. Yeah.
Like 7.5, 7 out of 10 movie. It was fun. Not a single performance in that movie was worthy of an Oscar nomination.
And I still think Hanks in the years since this has been trying to do interesting things with his career. Like, I have to give him credit. He is not just like sitting back and resting on his laurels. He's trying new things. A lot of the things he's tried have been swings and misses. And so there's a part of me that feels like this is the last great Tom Hanks performance and it was not recognized at all. And that really sucks, dude.
Yeah, Tom Hanks is one of the greatest actors of all time. Like, he'll probably be like a Mount Rushmore GOAT type actor, at least in American cinema. And the fact that this, like I said, the fact that he didn't get nominated for Best Actor in this year, Bob, I wept at the end of this movie.
Yeah, I cried a lot.
I mean,
in a way that I was not expecting to shed any tears at this movie. Even like 90% of the way into the movie, I was like, okay, riveting stuff.
Yep.
I don't think you're going to emotionally get me here. And then all of a sudden, man.
And you've seen it before.
I've seen that clip at the end of the film multiple times on YouTube. And if you don't know what we're talking about, I think it's time to spoil the movie a little bit. And in order to do that, it's time for our first segment of the day, which we call Brad Explains.
Brad's gonna give us the movie plot with only 60 seconds ticking on the clock. So let's go ahead and hear your take with this little segment that we call Brad Explains.
Brad Explains is the part of the show where Brad breaks down the plot of the film that he has just seen, often for the first time. This was Brad's first time with Captain Phillips. And I have to say, man, I saw this in the theater when it first came out. And we can talk a little bit about the shaky cam of it all. I think that it was a very engrossing theater experience. As I was watching it on my TV today, I thought to myself, I wonder how this plays for a first-time viewer if they're only watching it on their laptop or their TV. So, Brad, before you even spoil the movie, did the immersiveness of the movie come through on a smaller screen?
I think it did. My struggle is the fact that Netflix freaking is showing their movies at like 244p lately, or 144.
Yeah, dude.
What's going on there, man?
They're trying to get you to pay more for 4K.
Oh my god.
And they're ramping everybody else down, I think, to make the effect more dramatic. Like, oh, you need 4K. It's like, no, dude, we just need like 720p. Could you meet me in the middle? Like, that would be awesome.
Like, truly, I think at best this was 360p. It was rough. So yes, that definitely degraded my experience, and I will be leaving a scathing review on Google's Netflix something.
Yes,
I don't know. I'm going to find a place, and I'm going to leave a very bad review of Netflix.
All right,
and
Brad,
it's going to hurt them.
I'm sure it will, Brad. They're going to miss that $7 a month from you that you're not paying and sharing someone else's password with. So,
whoa. I
Is it
will
yours?
not have. It's 100% mine.
all right,
Thank
well, there you
very
go.
much.
Brad's paying his own $7. There you go, USA. All right, dude, you have 60 seconds to spoil this movie. Folks, if you haven't seen Captain Phillips, I highly recommend it. I know you're probably stuffing a turkey right now. If you have the chance to press pause and watch this movie, you should absolutely do so, and then come back and listen to the rest of the episode. Brad, 1 minute and go.
Captain Phillips is a film about a man. Guess what his name is, Bob? Guess what his name is?
Captain Phillips?
Yeah.
Oh,
First name
good.
Captain, last name Phillips.
What an appropriately named man.
You might say he was destined for the job he worked. Rich Phillips is a captain of a cargo ship that is sailing around the Horn of Africa on the eastern side of Africa that is eventually boarded by Somali pirates. As the pirates slowly try to force him to acquiesce to their demands, he cunningly forces them into some traps, eventually gets them to leave the ship with $30,000, but unfortunately they are able to capture him in the lifeboat. As they are on the lifeboat, the U.S. Navy catches up and slowly begins the process. Honestly, it feels like a spider, like layering a web around a fly as they slowly trap them. And the end of this movie is the single most realistic depiction of a trauma response that I have ever seen in my life. And I've seen a decent amount of trauma responses. And it was horrific and perfect.
There you go. Captain Phillips, folks. Brad, there's a lot to say about this movie. Typically, we keep our Hanksgiving episodes a little bit shorter, so we'll try to condense. Do you want to get the Hanks of it all out of the way now? Because I feel like we've kind of already dove into discussing the performance a bit. Maybe we should just round it out.
Yeah, I mean, to set the stage of the end of the movie, Tom Hanks is great throughout the movie, but there's nothing in it that makes me go, oh, this is peak Hanks. It's really good Tom Hanks.
He's
acting.
doing bad accent work again. He's going back to the Carl Hanratty, Catch Me If You Can Boston accent for a hot second.
But then it disappears.
It's gone halfway
a quarter
through.
of the way into the movie. Yeah. So all normal Tom Hanks stuff that is forgivable because he's Tom freaking Hanks. At the end of the film, the main captor has boarded the U.S. Navy ship in order to negotiate a deal for money, which is fake and not going to happen. And the 3 remaining Somali pirates are on this tiny, cramped lifeboat with Tom Hanks. They string him up. They're going to shoot him, execute him. They have him blindfolded. And at the last moment, the Navy SEALs are able to take sniper shots on the 3 Somali pirates, and they take them out. And from that moment to the end of the film, Tom Hanks is transcendent. I don't know if I've ever seen an actor go from, oh, wow, it's Tom Hanks. He's great. The performance in this movie is solid, to this might be one of the best, 10 minutes of acting I've ever seen in my life.
100%. And here's
am I wrong?
No, and here's the real feat. Tom Hanks, you know this, Brad, one of my favorite actors. I feel like in the last 4 or 5 years, the roles that he's taken on have both seemed a little bit more comfortable for his wheelhouse and also exposed some very minor flaws in his acting. I don't think I would say anyone's a perfect actor, and everybody has their own little foibles, and Tom Hanks has his. And
for Tommy Wiseau.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, that goes without saying. So Tom Hanks is not a good improviser. And I don't mean that, I've seen clips of him. There's a really famous clip that's gone around YouTube of him and Tom Holland on a talk show where he's talking about how you kind of run these drills as an actor where you just do 80 passes at the same line and you learn to be quick on your feet. I'm not saying he's not witty. I'm not saying he's not quick on his feet. But Paul Greengrass, the director of this movie, has a very specific style, and it's very kind of cinema verite, shaky cam. It's almost documentary feel. He uses a lot of non-actors in this movie. And I think that throughout the film, you can tell when Tom Hanks is acting against non-professional actors because he still has that sort of constraints of Hollywood acting upon him. Like he's trying real hard to seem like a regular guy. And I think that he's just kind of butting up against the fact that he's Tom Hanks a lot. And so I think that makes the end of the film even more extraordinary because he's not a great improv guy. And then you get to the end of the film and he's acting against this, like, you know, paramedic basically, who is a real life, like, corpsman and not an actor. And his ability to inhabit a person that has like a deep shock trauma response, it's unbelievable. And I think, like, again, nothing against Tom Hanks as an actor. He's an incredible actor, but it's almost like he took the weakest part of his game and then said, I'm going to give you the 5 best minutes of my career, and it's going to be doing what I'm the worst at. And I think it's commendable.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to say it again because it deserves saying. He should have been nominated for Best Actor.
Oh, yeah.
And Bob, I'm going to be very vulnerable with you. I didn't just weep at the end of this movie. Like, I had a response to this movie that I've never had to any movie in my life. Like, I wept for about 20 minutes straight.
Wow.
And I realized that in my own personal life, I've been on a journey of healing for a few years and learning more about myself and learning more about my story. And I think something I've realized is that as my life story becomes more integrated and it makes more sense to me, and my emotions are more integrated into my physicality, my body, and my spirituality, like, as all of those pieces and parts come together, movies are harder for me to watch because I don't find myself being able to dissociate the feelings that the movie is bringing up in me from who I am and all the rest of the parts of my life. And so as a hospital chaplain, like, I saw some really fucked up stuff, like super messed up stuff. And watching Tom Hanks go through a trauma response was so vivid to what real life is like for a lot of people who go through horrifically disgusting, gross, broken, dark things that it messed me up, man. I had to go upstairs. Haley was like helping me regulate and calm down because it was brutally honest and brutally raw. And I don't say any of that to say it was bad or I wish I hadn't watched it. I think it's one of the best endings of a film I've ever seen in my life. But man, oh man, was it intense.
Dude, your wife, I can't even imagine what she thinks of me from day to day. Like, I'm just imposing these things on you, and then you're like going to her to help process all the time.
It was wild, man.
Oh, man. I mean, obviously I didn't have to the extent that you had, but it's a really affecting ending. And I think to kind of zoom out a little bit on the movie itself, let's talk really briefly about Paul Greengrass and his style. So Greengrass was a filmmaker who made a small movie called, I think, is it called Bloody Sunday? Let's see what it's
Blood
called.
Diamond.
Yeah, Bloody Sunday in 2002, and then gets tapped to take on the latter part of the Jason Bourne series. So Doug Liman directs the first Bourne Identity, and then Greengrass takes on Bourne Supremacy and Bourne Ultimatum. He kind of rockets to critical darling status when he makes the film United 93 in 2006, I believe. And then, you know, he's been a really good both commercial and critical director since then. But this is his signature style. He likes the shaky cam look, and I think he really, he found his moment in time in the early 2010s because everything was shaky cam. I think that the shaky cam in this movie works really, really well, both because it captures perfectly the utter chaos of this entire ordeal. And it's like, we're on a boat. You know what I mean? Like there's never a sense of equilibrium because we're always constantly moving back and forth. So I was never nauseated by the camera work. I thought, honestly, for being handheld, they did a great job with having you understand the geography of everywhere you were. It didn't seem Like it evoked chaos, but the camera work itself was not chaotic.
And they do a really great job when they're on the cargo ship of establishing, here's the engine room, here's the bridge, here's what the staircases are, you know, the levels, and you never lose track of where you're at on the ship. And then you're on a tiny ass lifeboat that you definitely never lose track of where you're at.
But even then, they're like, you know, and I think the script is pretty solid. But there are moments where, you know, like at the beginning conversation that Hanks and his wife are having in the car where they're like, I hate the world we're leaving to our children. Yes, I know, darling. Isn't it the worst? Like there's moments. But where it does a really good job is helping establish geography of scenes. So like when the Navy first comes and is negotiating with them and they tell Tom Hanks, you know, Hanks yells to them like, I'm in seat 15. And they say later, you need to go back to the seat that you've been sitting in this whole time. And then, you know, there's a shot of him sitting in the seat and you see the tiny number 15 next to it. And it's like, okay, I understand now, like where everything's at on this tiny little life vessel, because they used the camera really well. And they also told me exactly what I need to know to help process this information.
Yeah. Yeah. The one element of the film that didn't totally work for me was the tension in the opening scene, not the opening scene, but when the pirates are first chasing the ship and they eventually kind of get beaten off by the waves and so on. There's a part of me that was like starting to feel tense and like, oh, are they going to catch him? And then as I thought that, I was like, oh yeah, they're totally going to catch him, because if they didn't catch him, there wouldn't be a movie.
Like we did it. We evaded them. And credits.
Yeah. Starring Tom Hanks. Like I, you know, for better or for worse, like he's trying to build tension, but there is moments like that where it's like, oh, if this next thing doesn't happen, we don't have a movie. So there's not really much narrative tension here.
Well, and even if you've never seen the film, you probably have been made aware of the line, look at me, I'm the captain now.
And that line can't happen unless he's with Tom Hanks.
Oh, man. All right. I think we have a lot more to talk about with this movie. But again, we're trying to keep it short today. We're trying to get you sent off to Thanksgiving dinner on a high note. Brad, let's take a break. Let's drink some of this bourbon. What do you say?
Let's get to it.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the US. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP works wonders.
Way to eat a tea. You're listening to an ad for PC Game Pass. Want new games on day one like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? How about living out your Sims life with EA Play? We're talking high quality PC games all for one low monthly price. We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle available December 9th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. Okay, that's the ad. You can go back to doing whatever you were doing now.
All right, so today we are checking out Jefferson's Ocean. This is a bourbon that we've been trying to get on the podcast for a long time, Brad, and, you know, it just kind of always gets pushed to the back burner. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, it's a whiskey that has been around for a long time, long enough, dare I say, to lose the novelty?
Yeah, it's lost a bit of its luster. This was a huge tater bourbon for a long time. People really chased this thing, and I think it's because of the gimmicky marketing around it. So the whole concept of Jefferson's Ocean is that Jefferson's, which sources its bourbon, takes its bourbon and puts the barrels on some sort of cargo ship going somewhere around the world. And for a period of months, it travels on the high seas, sloshing around in these barrels and apparently, you know, extracting even more from the wood because of that amount of sloshing. Brad, you and I have not tried this before, at least not on the show, but have you tried it in real life?
I have tried it in real life. I believe I tried Voyage. something in the late teens, like 17 through 19, with a friend way, way back in the day. And I remember thinking it was very good. They called it the Rubber Duck Voyage because it apparently, like, a cargo ship lost a cargo container full of rubber ducks. And it, like, there was, like, literally, like, 1 billion rubber ducks just randomly in the Pacific Ocean. And then the cargo ship carrying the Jeffersons, like, floated straight through this massive sea of rubber ducks. And that is what I remember from that voyage of Jefferson's.
You just get that slight hint of rubber on the palate with that one.
Yeah. Makes you want to quack.
Exactly. So what we're doing today, folks, Brad and I are actually going to try 2 different types of Jefferson's Ocean, or 2 different voyages. That's how they label each one of these vintages. I'm trying voyage number 23. It's clocking in at 90 proof. Brad, which one are you trying today?
I am trying the Jefferson's Ocean Voyage 10 cask strength.
Oh, cask strength. Okay. Yeah, we basically decided, look, I have a bottle of this on my shelf. Brad had a buddy that had a bottle. And usually we try to sip the same whiskey, but I trust our palates enough. And let's be frank here, dude. It's Hanksgiving. We can do what we want. I thought it'd be cool to get a broader picture of the Jefferson's Ocean lineup. Usually when we have something like this, we try one variety of it and we pass judgment on the entire label. This time we get to sample 2 different voyages. There's a lot of variance here. Obviously yours is cask strength, mine's 90 proof. So hopefully we get a clearer picture of what this is actually like. But I'm excited to dive in, man. So why don't you give me your nosing notes on Voyage 10, and then I'll jump in with 23.
This is wild, man. I don't know if we've ever tried like 2 different whiskeys for a normal episode before.
No,
I feel really weird.
I have to take your word for it, too. Like, I have to trust that your palate is on point today.
Yeah, I don't know if I trust your palate after 5 years, Bob.
No, nor should you.
Well, the nose on this Jefferson's Ocean 10 cask strength is really beautiful. I am getting lots of really classic bourbon notes. There's butter, there's caramel, there's some pecan coming through. It's brown sugary, and there is a little bit of an acidity, like a coffee bean, like a fresh coffee bean that hasn't been ground yet. It's a really beautiful nose. I'm going to give it an 8.5 here.
Yeah, on my 23, I just popped this bottle for the first time last night. And it's funny because I'm sampling it again today as we drink. And there's different notes now. I think it's finally like, the air has gotten into it a bit. It's calmed down a bit in the bottle. But when I first popped it, what I really picked up was a strong berry and wine heavy note. And like a really bright grape note. It was almost champagne-y. And then it kind of just tipped into that overly sweet kind of Welch's sparkling grape juice that you get for the kids to toast with on New Year's Eve because they can't have the alcohols,
Dude, that was like the best when you were a kid.
Yeah, man. And then today it's calmed down a bit. I get some more classic bourbon notes. There's definitely some vanilla here. I get almost like a peaches and cream on this, which is really, really nice. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 on the nose.
For me, as I moved into the palate, it turned into this really nice, like an orange, zesty peel vibe that I was really digging. There's some brown sugar. It's very vanilla-y. And the butter stuck around. It definitely dissipated some. I was looking forward to like a butter bomb, and it wasn't quite there. This is a really good palate. Not as overwhelming as the nose was. I'm going to give it a 7.5 here.
I think what I'm learning today is like, don't take the very first sip out of a bottle that's been sitting on your shelf unopened for a few years as gospel truth, because my notes from last night are not really applying to today, hardly at all. Last night, this was really thin on the mouthfeel to me, and it tasted pretty watered down. I told you right before we started recording that I was worried I was going to sound too negative about this, but it tasted like a really generic, bland 80 proof whiskey. And this is 90 proof. And it's not priced as a generic whiskey. So I'm thinking of it like, Old Crow or very old Barton or something really cheap is what this tasted like last night. I think today it's developed a little bit more character. Like it's presenting on the mouthfeel a little bit thicker. It has almost like a dusty quality to it, which I really, really like. I still wouldn't call this a great whiskey, Brad, but it's bringing a little bit more of that bourbon sweetness. There's a little bit of brown sugar. I'm going to bring my score up from what was a 4.5 last night when I tried it up to a 6.5 today.
Okay. Yeah, that is a big shift, Bob. The finish for me here jumped up. It's like right in the middle of the nose and the taste. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. It got into a really nice, peppery clove, a little bit of like a dried tobacco finish with a hint of that vanilla holding on. I very much so enjoyed the finish. Like I said, 8 out of 10. Bob, all around, I'll just go ahead and give my balance score here. I think this is a really well-balanced whiskey that at cask strength, which I believe was 112 proof, I think it's offering a really nice experience. Now, I don't know if it's enhanced by the voyage it took around the world, but at the very least, they made a good whiskey.
Mm-hmm. I think the reason that I was saying that this presented like a really cheap whiskey is it's so thin on the mouthfeel that even at 90 proof, the flavors that are trying to escape onto your palate and prove something of themselves are so like minimized by the amount of wateriness here. It reminds me of like when you have a really good kind of high ABV cocktail and you get down to that very last sip that's been sitting there kind of mingling with the ice. And you're like, oh, okay, like this would be really good if it still tasted like an old fashioned, but now it tastes like a watered down old fashioned. That's kind of what I have here in my glass. I really wish that I was able to try this one at cask strength. But what's unfortunate is like, this is not an 80 proof whiskey. This is a 90 proof whiskey, and it's still lacking that depth and complexity that it really needs to have. So I am going to punish it a little bit here on the finish. The flavors are all there, and it feels like they want to come out, but the proof point is keeping it from doing that. I'm going to give it just a 6 out of 10. And then on the balance, Brad, this is kind of hard for me. Again, we're drinking two completely different voyages. What's weird with Jefferson's is they source their whiskey, and they have never really hidden that fact. What I don't know is, are they using the exact same whiskey from voyage to voyage? Like, is this the same mash bill from the same place that they're sourcing it from every single time they put it on the water? Or are they, buying some barrels from Barton and some barrels from Heaven Hill, and it all becomes Jefferson's voyage or Jefferson's Ocean? I don't know. So it's hard for me to even if I sat down with your Jefferson's 10 here, Brad, I don't know if I'd be able to tell if this was the same type of whiskey. And so there's so many variables. It becomes really hard to gauge, like, what is this label about? I say all that to say, on the balance, I think it's just really thrown out of whack. And the fact that they're offering some of it at cask strength and some of it only at 90 proof, I think underlines the fact that there's just a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of variables. And it seems kind of inconsistent as a label. And for me, I'm just going to give it a, 6, 5.5. How generous am I feeling? I'm going to give it a 5.5 on balance, Brad.
Apparently not very generous. Oh, man. I think value-wise, the cask strength versions of these seem like they are for sale at the $100 price point, which is not in our luxury category. But it's definitely not in our cheap category, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a cask strength version of this, $100 is a little expensive for my taste. Like, you're getting into triple digits. You better have a daggone good whiskey, Bob. I think I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 on value.
Yeah, I'm going to be even lower than you. And again, I'm only speaking for my bottle of this. I think that if this was cask strength, I would be significantly higher on value because this tastes like it would be good whiskey at cask strength, but it's not. It's 90 proof, and it's not a particularly good 90 proof bourbon. So I'm just going to give this a 4 out of 10 on value. Ooh. Now, again, it's super gimmicky. Like this is the marketing ploy of all marketing ploys, but they do it for real. Like they're not making this up. As far as I know, they're actually putting this stuff on a ship. It's going around the world for a couple months, and it's coming back.
Wouldn't that be wild?
Would you?
It was just
honestly, with all we know about the industry now, would you be surprised, Brad?
Not even in the slightest. Not even in the slightest. If they just like put one barrel, paid for one barrel to be on the ship, and then blended that with 2,000 other barrels.
Yeah, they just like took a rolling cart and walked it across a ship that's docked somewhere. They're like, it was on the ship, man. Let's get it to store shelves now. Jeffersons, we're not trying to impugn your bread. I believe what you say.
I was going to say, we 100% believe you.
This bottle for me, Brad, not worth it. I would like to try that 10 that you drank at some point. I think this would be good at cast strength. But for this version, I'm only coming out to a 30 out of 50.
I was going to say, I am coming to a 37 out of 50. I liked this whiskey, just not at a $100 price point.
So that brings us to an average of just a 67 out of 100 or a 33.5 out of 50. So this is sitting right below the mark where we typically start recommending. Listen, I'll say this. If you're intrigued by the idea of whiskey that is aged at sea, I don't think it's like exorbitantly expensive. I think it's worth trying a pour at the bar. You're probably going to be set back, $12 to $15 for a pour of this. But like, just to be able to tell your buddy that doesn't drink whiskey how they make this, it's a fun little experiment.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot of different gimmicks in the world of whiskey. I actually do think that the Jefferson's Ocean gimmick is worth investigating and trying for yourself.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there you have it. Reviews of Jefferson's Ocean Voyage 10 and 23. Brad, what do you say we get back to Captain Phillips?
Oh, dude. What a movie. All right, everybody. Those were two expressions of Jefferson's Ocean, a whiskey that has been making waves in the wide world of spirits for a while now. And I think that if you find the right voyage, it can be worth it.
It is really funny, man. We've been doing this podcast long enough that I can remember when, yes, Weller has always been in demand by the taters, but Jefferson's was really popular among the taters for a long time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was just like everyone moved off of Jefferson's. So I feel like you can find this everywhere now if you like it. It's a cool story. It's just apparently doesn't have the Buffalo Trace marketing team behind it.
Yeah, it's funny, man. The first time I ever had a voyage of Jefferson's Ocean, the story was about how a cargo ship lost a crate off the side of the ship that was full of rubber duckies. And that literally almost 1 billion rubber duckies got released into the Pacific Ocean. And the boat carrying the Jefferson's whiskey, floated through this sea of rubber duckies. And I'm like, you just don't get stories like that when you're drinking whiskey from other brands. So it's a fun, unique premise on what you are drinking out of the bottle.
Is this movie better or worse with a floating island of rubber duckies? As another obstacle they have to navigate.
Immensely better. It's like the Life of Pi when they're floating, but instead it's a Somali pirate movie.
Yeah,
and there's rubber duckies everywhere, and it's are the ducks actually real? Is it symbolism, Bob?
All right, man, we need to get back on track. It's time for our favorite game that we play each week. It's called Two Facts and a Falsehood.
Brad is gonna try to stump you, Bob. Two are right and one is wrong. Two facts and a falsehood.
Two Facts and a Falsehood is the part of the show where Brad presents me with 3 items as fact about the making of this movie, one of which is a complete lie. Brad, I don't think we're counting this toward my season total, because then we'd end up with 34 entries after Cruisemas. So this is going to be a one-off, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I was thinking about guessing in the blind, but that's no fun. So you've done the legwork. Let's hear your 2 facts and a falsehood.
Fact number 1, as the pirates approach the Maersk, Alabama for the first time, the camera focuses on a pirate putting a chewing substance into his mouth. This is khat, which is a plant that grows on the Horn of Africa and has active ingredients of cathine and cathinone, which are alkaloids similar to cocoa, caffeine, and nicotine. Fact number 2, director Paul Greengrass was a member of the British Royal Navy, serving on the HMS Lancaster. He worked as a mass communications specialist, filming and editing promotional materials for the Navy. Fact number 3, the scene filmed in the Combat Information Center, where a sailor writes Seat 15 backwards on the status board, was improvised. Cinematographer Barry Ackroyd noted that the chief petty officer practiced writing backwards when not filming and asked him to repeat it for the film. The act of writing backwards in the Navy has gone away in recent years since the onset of technology has put all available information on electronic status boards.
Wow. I'm deciding between 2 and 3. Those sounded the fakest to me. I don't know if either one of them is actually true. The first one I believe is true because if you watched the movie with subtitles like I did, then they ask for, I believe it's called cot, right? Like one of them says like, "Hey, give me some of that."
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that's true. Number 3 sounds made up, except for the extent of detail you went in talking about it. Like you added, if you made that up, then God bless you. Because that was, you could have made that 2 sentences long and it was really long.
Yeah.
Which makes me think 2 is the falsehood. I don't know anything about Paul Greengrass aside from just like the movies of his that I've watched. So I don't know. He has kind of like long hippie-ish hair, which makes me think maybe he was never a military man, but who freaking knows?
Have you ever met military guys who served in Vietnam?
That's true, man. I'm going to say 2 is the falsehood, but I would not be surprised if it's 3.
Bob, you are 100% correct on this. 2 facts and a falsehood. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to me, man. And Christmas is coming soon, Brad, so get ready for that.
Oh, well, dude, I'm so pumped for Christmas this year.
I'm a big fan of Christmas, especially with little kids. It's just fun.
I was about to say my, soon-to-be 4-year-old. In literally a few days, she will be 4. We're finally going to start the tradition of, like, bringing the mattresses out and sleeping next to the Christmas tree.
You teased this last year. Did you guys not end up doing it last year?
We didn't do it last year. She was still kind of young, and, you know, we just figured it'd be better to wait. But this year, it's like, all right, we are all in. We're ready to do this. We're going to watch Charlie Brown Christmas. It's going to be great. Super excited for Christmas this year.
I love how in the middle of our Thanksgiving episode, we're already looking ahead. Yeah. We've got a turkey to eat, man. All right, sure Brad, let's kind of wrap things up today. We loved this movie. I think for me, this was a really solid, like 7.5 movie. Mostly because it was just kind of procedural. Like it was just like, hey, here's what happened and you're going to watch every step of the way. Masterfully done. But it wasn't until that ending that I think the real power of the movie comes through.
Well, and that's what I talked about in my like little opening line, was that this is a movie that is not necessarily about any individual part, but it's about how to build tension over the long burn of a 2-hour and 10-minute movie. Like, I think that's where this movie shines, is like, yes, it's all procedural, and the tension of that first chase scene is erased because you know they're going to get on eventually. And once they're on board, you're like, okay, you know, you kind of have an idea of where this is going. For me, once they got onto the lifeboat, that's when the tension just got ratcheted up, like, noticeably, and never stopped growing till the end of the film.
There is a part of me that, like, I did think it was kind of funny the way the crew was just like, no, Cap, don't do that. No, come back. It's like, you guys are freaking useless, man.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. Okay, let's kind of wrap up our conversation about the movie today. And in order to do that, we have to get to our final segment, which we call Let's Make It a Double.
We're near the end of the episode, so thanks for listening to the Film and Whiskey Show. Let's pair another film with this one, even if it's a struggle. It's our final segment of the day, now let's make it a double.
Let's Make It a Double is presented by Blackwood Distilling Company. This is the part of the show where we pick a movie to pair up with this one to make the perfect double feature. Brad, I think there's a number of directions you can go. One of my favorite elements of this movie, you know, once the mechanics of the film kick in, they don't dwell on it much longer, but it's just the kind of like, we are here to do a job. I didn't sign up for this. Like, I'm just a guy who's been thrown into these circumstances and I don't like it. And I think that's one of the stronger scenes in the movie featuring the crew, is when they're making that complaint known. And it brought to mind a couple films, both maritime oriented, one of which is called Deepwater Horizon. It's a Mark Wahlberg movie that is really, really good. It's about an oil rig disaster, another true story. I think you could go that direction, or I think you could go with one of my favorite other Mark Wahlberg movies, a movie from the early 2000s called The Perfect Storm, which is another movie about just guys at sea trying to do their job, facing these extraordinary circumstances. So I actually don't know which one I want to pick, man. I'll make it a triple, and I'm going to go with Deepwater Horizon and The Perfect Storm.
Well, if you follow Bob's advice, you're going to be watching movies for about 9 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I would pair this with a movie that I honestly have not seen since, oh man, I was probably like a 12 to 14-year-old, maybe like 14 to 16-year-old. I remember watching the modern and older version of The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah.
And I liked both of those versions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to recommend that you watch either one of them, maybe not both. The older 1974 version has a 7.6 on IMDb. The modern version with Denzel and John Travolta has a 6.4. So you do with that what you will. But I think that you could watch either of those films. Actually, now that I'm realizing it, Bob, there's another great movie you could watch. Well, not necessarily a great movie, a great pairing. I think Dog Day Afternoon might be a good pairing with this.
I like how you started this by saying, man, Bob recommended a total of 3 movies. That's
and
too
now
many.
Now
you've recommended 4. So
yeah,
there you go, folks. That we've recommended enough movies to last you from now until Christmas, and then we'll just be good to go.
100%. Then you can watch Home Alone and you'll just be happy.
If there's anything else you could pair it with, there is a fantastic episode of South Park called Fat Beard that came out in the wake of this movie, where Eric Cartman hears about the Somalian pirates and wants to be a pirate. And so he shows up in Somalia dressed as like Jack Sparrow and wants to be a pirate. He sings a little song. It's very funny. I'll have to send that to you after the episode, Brad.
I would love to watch that.
All right, let's give this movie some final scores. I think that this is... I can see an 8.5. I could see an 8 for this movie. The ending is just so good, man. But there are a few bumps in the road along the way. So I'm going to land at an 8 out of 10 on Captain Phillips.
I think I was a little higher than you on the initial portion of the movie. And both you and I are at like 10 out of 10 for that last little bit. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to land a little higher. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
I think for me, it was sitting at an 8, maybe 8.5. And then the final scene happened. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is truly a beautiful movie in the most sad ways possible. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for me, Bob.
All right. So we're landing at an average of an 8.5 out of 10. But we'd like to know what you think. Is Captain Phillips worthy of being called a modern classic? Actually, Brad, yes or no? Modern classic?
I think I'd say yes. Specifically because if you are looking for a masterclass in how to raise the stakes and tension, like he does it in so many different ways with the music, the camera work, the sound design, it just grows in intensity so well. Yeah, I think it's deserving of that moniker.
I think it's like just outside of that for me. Like really good movie, but if I had to make my list of all time, 21st century classics, it probably just misses the cut. But folks, this is something you can tell us who's wrong about. You can find us on all of our social media accounts: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube at Film Whiskey.
Or you can jump on the Discord where we are talking every single day about turkey and stuffing and dressing and all of the beauties of eating in America. If you want to join that conversation, you can find a link at the end of any one of our show notes.
We want to say thank you again to our sponsor, Blackwood Distilling Company. If you go to bourbonoutfitter.com/filmwhiskey and use our code FILMWHISKEY at checkout, you'll get 5% off any bottles of Blackwood that you purchase. Brad, we will be back next week with our regularly scheduled programming, and I believe we're going to be looking at one of your favorite films of the last 15 or so years. It's 2016's La La Land.
Oh, I'm really excited for that, Bob.
perhaps a more appropriate Thanksgiving movie than this one, but that's okay.
No, definitely not.
Join us for La La Land next Tuesday, but until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.